Who am I as a person? I don't know. It's changing. Like every year, I feel like a new, different person. More things annoy me every year. So
What's
I
the
feel
latest
like,
thing? What's the latest thing that annoys you?
oh my God. Okay. Well, I saw this thing on TikTok. Well, the latest thing that's annoying both my wife and I in our marriage is having to decide what's for dinner. Somebody like recently did this Instagram about like, please explain like what's hard about marriage. And this guy comes on and he's like picking meals. And I like could not feel more aligned to that. It's
What's
pretty
so hard
annoying.
about it?
It's really hard, Sam. It is hard.
Tim, you know how annoying it is to pick dinners with a partner. Like,
I just do whatever my partner wants.
okay, well, what if you have one that doesn't can't make decisions, just
But
wants to
has
like, talk
opinions.
about it, has opinions?
Has opinions. They're like, no, I could eat anything. And you're like, sushi, not feeling sushi.
Yeah,
Want
yeah.
Pakistani? Not feeling Pakistani either. And then that goes on for 45 minutes. You've looked at all of Uber
You know what I
Eats.
call that? I call that love. That's love.
This is Topline.
Thank you for tuning in. This episode was brought to you by the Revenue Optimist community and Traction Complete. You can learn more, watch the latest episode, and find the Revenue Optimist under resources on Traction Complete's homepage at tractioncomplete.com.
Welcome to Topline, everybody. AJ is in Monument Valley. Do we know where that is? We don't know where that is.
No idea where that is. It's in the Grand Canyon is where he's sending pictures from. So somewhere
It's
there.
in the desert Southwest.
Yes.
And we've got a substitute co-host, Andrea Kaya.
Thank you.
Hi,
Thanks for
Andrea.
having me. Hi. I'm so
How are
honored.
you?
Big shoes to fill, but happy to be here.
I think you were our first guest, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like probably about a year ago. But for those who don't know you, who are you?
Oh my God, that's deep.
That's the question of life.
I'm currently the chief revenue officer at Help Scout. We're basically like a Zendesk competitor. But I was formerly CMO.
Yeah.
Who am I as a person? I don't know. It's changing. Like every year, I feel like a new, different person. More things annoy me every year. So
What's the latest thing? What's the latest thing that annoys you?
oh my God. Okay. Well, I saw this thing on TikTok. Well, the latest thing that's annoying both my wife and I in our marriage is having to decide what's for dinner. Somebody like recently did this Instagram about like, please explain like what's hard about marriage. And this guy comes on and he's like picking meals. And I like could not feel more aligned to that. It's
What's
pretty
so
annoying.
hard about it?
It's really hard, Sam. It is hard.
Tim, you know how annoying it is to pick dinners with a partner. Like,
I just do whatever my partner wants.
okay, well, what if you have one that doesn't can't make decisions, just
But
wants
has
to
opinions.
has opinions?
Has opinions. They're like, no, I could eat anything. And you're like, sushi, not feeling sushi.
Yeah,
Want Pakistani? Not feeling Pakistani either. And then that goes on for 45 minutes. You've looked at all of Uber Eats.
You know what I call that? I call that love. That's love.
Well,
what is Pakistani? Like, what are they?
Yeah.
It's like Indian food, but better. So that's Pakistani food. Less sauce, less spice, more flavor.
All right. Are there great Pakistani restaurants in Toronto?
Many in Toronto, not that many in New York, though.
I could not name one, and I'm Middle Eastern, and I just could not name one Pakistani
There's
restaurant.
one in Chelsea or close to Chelsea that's Indian that's good. It's called something Nawab. But I remember we used to order from that when I was in New York for a while. But yeah, not a lot of places in New York.
Oh, okay. All
When
right.
you come here, I'll take you.
Okay.
I don't know what number episode this is, but it's
50.
Gonna be... Oh, this is 50.
What's up? Look at that.
We're halfway there to another milestone, which will be on the road to some other milestone. Nevertheless,
Yeah.
Asad, why don't you kick us off?
Oh yes, so we have a bunch of things to discuss. We're going to talk about Klarna using AI on their support team. We're going to talk about product marketing, sales and marketing alignment. But let's start with growth versus free cash flow margin. So when people say growth at all costs, they're essentially referring to the premium that we put on growth versus free cash flow margins when valuing a company. In 2021, when we would hear growth at all costs, growth essentially had an 11.6x premium on FCF margin. Now, we all know why, and then the market turned, and there was this push towards efficiency. So we've now had 8 quarters of relative stability in this ratio, which kind of indicates where the new normal is. And that is that growth has a 2.9x premium on free cash flow margin. Seems more reasonable, feels more rational for the types of businesses we're talking about. So we're in a new world. Efficiency definitely matters over here. And so, Andrea, let's start with you. As a CRO, how does this impact how you look at the business and the things you think about? How do you incorporate this into your day-to-day?
Yeah, and I think Asad, I think Bessemer recently talked about that concept that, well, rule of 40 was
Yeah.
like the thing that governs it, right? Like that's free cash flow profit margin, and then a growth rate like combined at 40 is like the North Star. By the way, I recently looked at this, like the best companies on the planet struggled to get there. So
Yeah.
I don't know who decided 40 was like in the first place, but now it's rule of X, which
Yes.
basically puts some multiple in front of growth so that you can more heavily weight it because it's more important anyway. So I know that the concept's changing over time, but I've always operated in this way. I mean, I don't know when growth at all costs was ever a thing, and certainly at Electric, when I was at Electric and we went from $5 to $50 million, we certainly valued the growth over like scrutinizing every penny, but it wasn't unlimited. I mean,
Mhm.
so most of my VC experience, I never had CEO that was like, marketing gets trillions of dollars, but that was formerly my background as CMO, right? Like as a capital allocator, they were never like, here's $10 million, like run with it, like best of luck. There was still like lots of scrutiny over every dollar that got spent. So I don't know what it looks like to be in a world where like, it was like sort of unlimited. But the last thing I'll say is, uh, you know, even in a growth at all cost like environment over the last couple years, I still think even to this day the ones that did it the best didn't need to spend the money. They figured out a way to grow through product, and those are the ones that kind of like were the phoenix from the ashes, where they were like they had an awesome freemium or PLG motion that just like helped them crush. They didn't actually need to spend the money even though they could. So by the way, the companies I'm thinking of are like, Atlassian, that they continue to figure out how to, um, you know, just win with less. If you look at their rule of 40 is always, very high. They have very small sales and marketing. Well, not small. I mean, it's relative, but like reasonably sized sales and marketing teams are just like not spending it. The product's doing the heavy lift on their growth. Anyway, that's how I think about it.
Do you think that's super interesting? Do you think that for companies do you think it's really helpful to have this PLG motion when you're thinking about efficiency, because it's more predictable when you're spending the money on marketing versus on sales to try and drive growth? Like why the PLG motion? Why does that help with efficiency?
Yeah, I mean, certainly like when you have a PLG company, like ACV is the other side of the coin. Like anybody who's self-serving into like $1 million contract is not possible,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
we get that.
yeah.
So there's like the downside is that you're likely getting like smaller customers or whatever. But if you think about the um, the flywheel that can happen when you have, let's just say, like somebody's using your product and it's for free to start, but you can brand all the ways in which there's like it's kind of like free marketing once you like have a product out, like whether it's a beacon, like a chatbot or something saying like powered by Drift or powered by Help Scout or whatever. So there's like free marketing that happens, when that happens. But think about all the like the sales and marketing expense you don't need when somebody's just like helping themselves to the product. So now that I work in a PLG company, I'm like my eyes are really open to thinking
Interesting.
about starting a company in the future or thinking about the companies that I think are going to be really successful in the future. I'm like, I think you all kind of need it. So I don't know.
That's
Just
so interesting. Sam, what do you think about this like shift in like now that you have some data almost, you've been talking about profitable, efficient growth for some time.
yeah.
But when you hear this data point of, and this data point came from Redpoint Ventures, they had the annual shareholder meeting. And this was probably the slide that I found most interesting in that deck. So when you hear that growth has a 2.9x multiple on free cash flow margin. How does that land with your thinking around PEG? Is that where you think it should be? Is that even still too high?
No, that's exactly where I thought it would be. I felt like growth is worth 3 times what profitability is worth. So 2.9 is pretty close to 3.
Right there.
That feels certainly everybody I've talked to a lot of people recently, both about my company, Pavilion, and also just about other companies. And to a person, everybody says, listen, efficiency and profitability are great, but if you're not growing,
Yeah.
you're going to
You're dead.
exclusively be, well, you're not dead. You're just you're valued exclusively on a multiply of EBITDA. You are not going to be valued on any kind of revenue multiple because the revenue isn't growing. So there needs to be growth to generate significant enterprise value or disproportionate enterprise value. And so 3 times, makes perfect sense to me. I guess the other thing I would say is for us, at least, it's a sequence of steps moving from, slow growth to no growth and unprofitable to growth and profitable. And for us, the first step is profitable.
Hmm.
And then the next step is growth, right? So last year was really hard for Pavilion. We didn't grow very much, grew a little bit, and we were deeply unprofitable through, October. And then we made some difficult decisions that mean that for Q1, we're significantly profitable from a cash flow perspective, more nominally profitable from an EBITDA or revenue perspective, but still profitable. And then for us, this year is continuing to be about stabilization and profitability, but keeping an eye on our growth measurements to understand, do we have the option to grow? And the encouraging thing for me, for us right now is that when we're looking at LTV to CAC across our different membership segments, our individual memberships are close to 4-to-1 LTV to CAC. Our corporate membership, which also has some issues with it, and even that is above 3-to-1. So what that tells me is there's room to invest in growth should I want to, and I just want to continue to improve our overall. What I really want to improve is our retention and our core foundational execution around our product. And then, but I know that if I want to lean in a little bit more to growth, that it's there for leaning. And I guess what I'm really doing this year is building up a little bit of a war
War
chest, so to
chest. Yeah.
speak, on the balance sheet, so that if I need to lean in, I can.
That war chest is such a, people don't realize how calming it is to have, because when you're in choppy waters but you have a war chest banked up, it really takes a lot of the anxiety away and allows you to clearly think about what my next move should be. When you're burning capital at the rates that companies were burning it before, and then the market turns on you, you just see your terminal date, right? You're like, oh
Yeah.
my god, like this
Yeah,
is
of
gonna.
course. And the companies aren't the issue. To your point, Asit, is like the terminal value is zero. If
Yeah.
it's slow growth and you're burning capital, my board told me a year ago or a year plus ago, when I was overly obsessed with valuation, they said, I said, what do you think it's worth? They said, well, if you're profitable, it's worth this. I said,
Yeah.
what if we're not profitable? And they said zero, then it's worth nothing.
Yeah.
And they said, and by the way, there's no more money. So just so you know, there's no more money. And if you don't turn this thing around, you're worth zero. And that was obviously a kick in the pants that forced me to make a bunch of different decisions. But it's besides just the peace of mind. I mean, it is peace of mind to be profitable, and it's greatly relieving. And also what my thought for the week
Mm,
is the following. Here we go. Are you ready?
let's go.
This wasn't on the docket.
I like it.
Bill Gurley, I posted this on LinkedIn this week. Bill Gurley talks about how if you're not in the market, if you're in venture, but you are not selling, we've talked about this a little bit in the bubble in the past, selling during the bubbles, right? Selling during 2021 and 22, selling during 1999, 2000, selling maybe leading up to the great financial crisis. So 2000, early part of 2008. If you didn't realize returns cash on cash returns at that point, your returns in the venture capital asset class were like a fraction, and it might even be way, way worse than the S&P. And the point is that you need to participate in the bubble and be a seller during the bubble in order to achieve the returns that the best in class performers like Benchmark or First Round Capital, or Sequoia had realized. And for me, that lesson is true writ large across a number of different sort of vectors. And my point is that we think about compound growth in the equities markets, and the stock market says, the equities market, if you look back historically over, 100 years, the inflation adjusted rate of return is about 8%. If you add in inflation, it's about 10 to 12%. And when you think about that, and then you think about dollar cost averaging, and you think about Warren Buffett, and you say, I can't time the market, I need to be in the market. If I'm in the market, then if it's 10% a year, then every month it's about 0.8% return, and every month I'm in the market, I'll get about 0.8%. And that's not really how it happens, right? How it actually happens is that most of the time nothing happens, and then once in a while everything happens. And I think about that is true in business as well. At least it's my point, which is a long-winded point, but we have a little bit of time on this podcast. It's a long-form podcast. My point is that being in the market isn't important because of your compounding every single day. In the aggregate, you're compounding every single day, but most of the time what you're doing is waiting around for the next big moment to happen. And you just don't know when that's going to be. So you have to be in the market on the chance that maybe it's today. I liken that to being profitable as a business, searching for the next vector of significant growth, right? It's not that every decision you're going to make as an entrepreneur or as a CEO or as a CRO is going to lead to 1% return. And if I just make 10 decisions today, I'll get 10% return. And if I make 30 decisions, it'll be 30% return. It's the fact that most of your decisions will yield nothing at all. And one or two of your decisions will change the entire trajectory of your company. And the whole point is you have to be alive long enough to make those decisions. If you're unprofitable, you're working towards your terminal date. And if you're dead, you don't get to make the next decision that might have been the one that turned the entire thing around. And for Pavilion, that's something just on my mind, which is the beauty of profitability is that I have time to keep making decisions and keep searching for the next vector of growth. And as long as I'm alive, I have a chance to find it. And the odds are that I will find it. And if I'm dead, obviously I won't. And so that's sort of what I've been thinking about as it relates to both profitability and growth, which is this year's about profitability to build the war chest and to give us the opportunity to make lots more decisions. And one of those decisions will likely invigorate a new phase of growth for us.
Well, as you were talking, I thought of Blue Origin has this value, which is it's their motto. It's not a value. It's a Latin phrase. I don't know what it is in Latin, but it basically translates to step by step ferociously. And I think that's a really nice way to think about business, that it's like step by step, but we're moving at this like right pace. The other thing about the markets is that when people say that you've got to be in the market long term, and you hear that a lot when the market is turning, usually the people that are saying that have a lot of incentive in you being in market. So if you're working with a financial advisor, this is a business that my family is in. They have an interest in you keeping your money in market, right? So they'll be like, stay in the market long term, it all works out. That said, if you just do the math and say, let's say the market is frothy, and you've got good returns. Like I had close to 100% in 2021. And you get out when it's crashing. You get out at the right time and you stay out for the period where it's really volatile, and then you get back in. That is really good. It's just hard to time it, but it's not as impossible as people make it out to be. You might miss one day where the market turned up a little bit, but you're not in markets for that one day where it goes up 10%. You're in markets for the longer term game. So things can be timed. You don't have to be that precise. The market, when I got out of the market in 2021, it was November, it was down 10% already. I could have run out a little bit earlier, and I was upset. I was like, I should have done it earlier. But getting out then ended up being really good. And then I got back in when the time made sense. Andrea, when Sam was talking about CAC to LTV, I was thinking about the idea of LTV. So if tomorrow somebody comes to you, a founder of like a seed round company, and tells you my LTV is this, you're probably like, what?
Yeah.
Like, how do you know?
Yeah.
But then at some point a person comes to you, maybe a Series D CRO, and says, my LTV is this, way more believable, right? So what do you need? What pieces of information as a CRO do you need to see to be able to trust that LTV number? And when do you actually get that as a company goes on its journey?
Yeah. I will answer that, but also just so you both know, I actually don't give a shit about the market. I'm leaving my money in there till I retire, and I don't care. Like, I hope I make money, but like, I do not give that like any brain power. Like, my financial planner has it. Yes, he might be incented to like keep the money in there, but I'm just like,
Do it.
best of luck. Yeah, I like, and it's too stressful to think about the market
It
and
is
like
stressful.
timing it and like all that other shit. So I just hope I have enough to like retire at a senior living facility when I am 55. 55. My wife's like, 55? Like, what? First of all, she's 50 next year. So she's like, so 5 years, we got to move. I'm like, yep. Anyway,
These facilities are great. When you see them, it changes your mind. You're, I
amazing.
want to get there now. They're like playing board games, having movie night. It's amazing.
Okay. First of all, don't try to sell me on it. I am already like moved in mentally, like shuffleboard, like spades, like they have bars. I'm like here for it. So
I love
anyway, um, LTV, well, mostly the thing I care about, and which I talk about in CMO school, you know, Pavilion has CMO school. One of the like slides I have is more about just gross retention rate, because that's it. That's the be all end all of whether or not a company has product market fit. And like, I think that should just be the North Star for everybody. LTV like is, again, the lifetime value. I don't know. Well, maybe somebody was on a product that sucked, you know, before. And, you know, like it's just like a noisy thing. I realize the value of it, but like, today, what is gross retention rate? Like,
Mm.
and of course, like pre-seed or pre-revenue, like you don't really know either. So I guess like maybe gross retention is like nonsense, but I think you use that as your North Star to continue to calibrate how good your product is, because they can tell you in NPS that it's 50 or whatever. You're like, my product's fucking awesome. But if they don't tell you with their dollars, like you have a different problem. So GRR, I do think is like a very important thing. But for some companies, I actually think it can be low and also be fine. I just, you know, it's a math
Interesting.
problem.
Dig
Well,
into that.
well, you know, like I said, it's a math problem. And I actually like,
This is
um,
my favorite talk track of Andrea's, by the way. This is the thing that makes everybody feel better about their gross. Oh, I swore, but she swore. Andrew, we can't swear. There's no swearing.
no, oh my God, sorry.
We got feedback from like some parents who would drive their kids, and they're like, we like listening to it while we drive the kids, but then you guys go
Because you're
wild. And we were
scared.
wild for a while. Like we had no rules and things were intense. So Sam's asked us to.
By the way, your kids are hearing that on TikTok and Instagram anyway. Like, you know,
I
like
agree with Andrew.
this podcast is not going to be the thing that like your kids are going to like.
That's
Anyway. No, okay, sorry. I get it. Okay.
anyway.
But well, Sam, I mean, right? Isn't it math? And I understand.
It's
I know.
math. It's math relative.
Yeah.
But well, I'm speaking. Why don't you finish? Tell us your thoughts on why this is a math problem. I love these thoughts because they give me faith.
I know that optically, traditional investors are looking for a number north of 80 because there's so many calculations they're used to doing in their head about like below that. Okay, for north of 90 for enterprise, north of 80 for SMB. But for example, when I was at Upserve, you know, our GRR was 75%, because 25% of businesses, restaurants, go out of business every year. It's the industry. It's like, well, like the industry kind of is terrible. Well, not terrible. I mean, I love the restaurant industry. I just invested in a restaurant, but like, you know, just as a business, it's hard. Low gross margin. Like anyway, you get all that. So I think there are reasons why some companies can maintain a lower gross retention rate, which feels natural. If you have like a prosumer business or something like this, where they're acting like consumers, you maybe have to think about your retention rate like consumer businesses do. Like, I don't know, in that way. And then just make sure that the math works so that like your CAC, what it costs you to acquire that person over time, pays back quickly, but that you make it back. So again, I don't know. It's just like, a number objectively like needs to be somewhere is kind of like, okay, but or and. So that's kind of my thought on
I guess HubSpot is an example of a company that had exactly that issue, right? They had really high churn. They had similar churn to consumer businesses,
that. Wow.
and they found a way over time to get their net revenue retention into a healthy zone.
Mm,
But early on, they made the math work well enough to get to a stage where they could make the NRR work. So there's finally an example of a really at scale company that dealt with the SMB and figured it out. Most investors told HubSpot, there's no way for you guys to raise money and scale this out. You're servicing the wrong market. But that was the opportunity they saw. Sam, how does this make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel great. Andrea said this to me for a while. She sat in on one of her board meetings and she said, it's just a math problem. And here's, and again, like what Andrea means for those that are out there listening is if you have the right unit economic metrics like lifetime value to customer acquisition cost and CAC payback, meaning how quickly you get your dollar back after you put it into the top of the machine, then you can grow even with high churn. It is literally like, well, how much do you want to grow? And frankly, hopefully not speaking out of turn, that's what she did at Electric. Andrea and David Weiner did this at Electric, and it was sort of in a brilliant way of just saying, like, here's what the math says. Here's how much money we can put into the top of the machine. You want to get to 30 million, 50 million, 100 million in ARR. Here's how you do it. And that's awesome because exactly to her point, so many people are led to believe that if you don't have 80% gross retention, then you're not allowed to be a company. And what
Right.
I've said the whole time, first of all, you are allowed to be a company if you
Yeah.
make more than you spend, period, no matter what.
Right.
And second, you're allowed to grow if your customer acquisition cost isn't so high, then you can afford to have high retention. Fundamentally, afford to have high churn. Fundamentally, high churn means you can't spend as much on sales and marketing to grow because it's just going to put your unit economics out of whack. So what does that all that mean? That means that if Pavilion is at a moment where it has high churn, but we still have 4-to-1 CAC to LTV to CAC, that means that we can still grow if we want. We can still grow. Now that the point that I would make, the only thing I would say, and I would love to hear Andrew's response to this response, which is there's two factors, right? You can do that in a large TAM environment, right? If you don't think you've
Right.
scratched the surface of the total number of possible customers and you
Totally.
think that still most of the world has never heard about you in your ICP, then yes, it's a math problem. And it's a math problem and a detective problem. And it's a detective problem to find the channels that you can put the money to
Right.
work in to scale your growth. But the second part is, yes, also, if you're churning out a ton of people, the best lever for growth tends to be word of mouth. And that means that if the people are leaving and telling their friends that your product isn't very good, then yeah, theoretically it's a math problem, but the system is dynamic, not static, right? It's
Yeah.
like people are telling their friends, it's becoming harder and harder. Nothing is stable. It was 4-to-1 until you got into this next tranche of customers that aren't quite the ICP. And now all of a sudden it's 2.5-to-1. And now you're underwater on your math. All of that, however, is still to say to tell companies out there that have high churn, you're still allowed to grow. You still can grow. You have to
Right.
look at unit economics, but you still can grow if your market is large and you have the right relationship between customer acquisition and retention. And it's okay to have high churn if you have low CAC.
100%. And I would say, I, I am sort of assuming your TAM is large enough when I make that comment about the math problem. It's purely just like, just look at it on a spreadsheet to see if you're making more money than you're spending, kind of thing. But the other thing is, this is why I mentioned GRR first. I do think gross retention is a signal of whether or not your product is beloved, and because people are voting with their dollars. So like, don't discount that, because that's actually the problem to solve.
Mm.
It's not it like, you can still grow and you're still a business and you should care, but if people like what they see, but then they're leaving for other reasons, just focus on that. And one other thing about the math, truly, new customer acquisition, those customers are the ones that tend to expand faster, have higher NDR than those that have been sitting around a long time.
Wait, I
So
didn't know that. How do you know that? That's awesome.
Interesting.
I mean, you're just dropping a huge like little bomb in the
That's so
middle.
interesting.
Is that
Explain.
true?
Well, think about it. Like you have new customers and they're buying new things. Like Sam, let's just say you have like 10 classes to offer. The new customers coming in are going to buy those 10 classes faster than the OG. I mean, I'm not buying anything from Pavilion
Yeah, you
anymore.
don't buy any. All you do is take
Oh,
money
that's
from us.
interesting.
Andrea's like,
I
Andrea's like, why am I still paying dues? I'm like, we are cutting you big checks every month. She's like, I don't want to pay my $50 anymore.
So is it, Andrea, is it that if I'm a new customer, I'm coming in 2024 into this company as a customer, I'm seeing the product in its 2024 version. It's a great product. I'm excited. The relationship is new. All of these things make it so that as long as they've delivered some value to me, the probability of me deciding to buy more things from them is higher than the person who came in
100%.
2009. The product was crap.
Or
Their
Austin,
experience was
or they've already bought
tumultuous.
it, or they've already bought it.
Yeah.
Like it's counting already into the NRR or
Okay,
NDR.
yeah,
Like it's,
yeah.
like if they already have all the max products and you're counting NDR for a year after that, but they're already 100% of what they can buy, you can't expand them.
Hey, CMOs and marketing VPs, that's Chief Marketing Officers, join Pavilion in New York City, the Big Apple, for the CMO Summit on April 18th. The CMO Summit. At CMO Summit, you'll connect with other amazing B2B marketing executives and learn from folks like Udi Ledergor from Gong, Latny Conant of Sixth Sense, Andrea Kaya of Help Scout on topics like mastering the customer lifecycle, AI and marketing, and building an iconic brand. Register now at joinpavilion.com/CMO Summit and use the code Topline for an exclusive 15% discount on your ticket. That's joinpavilion.com/CMO Summit and the code Topline for an exclusive 15% discount on your ticket. I will be there and I look forward to seeing you there. It's going to be fantastic.
You're just like
This
this.
is so interesting. So we had this problem as a services business when in 2016, I started our exec search practice. And originally I was like, sales recruitment company, we should be doing end to end. And so we've got hundreds of customers. We'll go to them and be like, we've got this exec search practice. This made so much sense.
Right.
And it was really hard actually for companies that had worked with STA for 6 years on IC roles to be like, we're going to help you with this executive. It was a harder conversation than with net new customers. Them looking at the value proposition in its new version was way easier of a hurdle to cross than to get this other company to cross it. It was a very interesting insight.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the whole thing. The maid knocking, the tacos, all of it is worth it for what Andrea just shared with us.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, by the way, it was an insight that we're coming to, Nick Francis, the CEO at Help Scout, is the one that continues to like talk about this concept like a lot. I mean, this is why new customer acquisition is just as important as like, what we can continue to sell into our base. Because if you don't have new customers expanding at faster rates than the base, then your NRR will continue to stay at kind of like, I don't know, whatever the average is. So
that's interesting. Andrea, couple of things on that. So we had Mark Roberge on a couple of months ago, and he made this really interesting point, which was that with AI over time, there's certain businesses that can't exist today because the CAC versus the ACV doesn't make sense. It can't make sense on a 500 ACV, right? But with AI over time, maybe we're able to actually create these new types of businesses where by nature, the churn is going to be such that you have to be open to the idea that you have 60-70% retention and figure out a way to like scale that business. The question that comes to my mind as you were talking is two things. Number one, how important is it to track the reason for churning? Meaning that there's going to be a subset of customers that churn because their business is shut down. And then there are customers that are churning because they don't love the value that you're providing. Are you tracking that? How important is it? How do you track it?
Absolutely.
And what type of CAC payback do you need to see for this to make sense as well?
Well, we definitely track why a customer would be churning. But I joined Help Scout again. I joined as on the board 2 years ago, and I transitioned into operator because the gross retention was so high. Interestingly enough, like our customers, like our are not going out of business at the rates, for example, like the systemic risk you get with the restaurant industry. So it's very low to begin with. We do track, why, but it's the product. The product kicks ass. It's a really it's a really awesome
Ass is
thing.
okay, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
ass is fine.
Okay.
We need
Kicks
some
butt.
words we can use.
It kicks butt. Like it's really an awesome, it's really great. So I would say, first you do want to kind of, make sure that whatever the reasons are, like you're attacking that. I said gross retention is like a huge product market fit thing, and like do everything you can, put all your R&D resources around making it better. But CAC payback again is another just math problem. So we know what we can spend to acquire a customer. We don't really want to go above that. Sales and marketing is only 18% of revenue at Help Scout, primarily because 50% of the revenue is product led. And this is what I'm talking about. It needs to be 40.
Sales and marketing is 18%?
18% of revenue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really low.
Low. Yeah. It's usually 40 to 50%. It's because product's doing 50% of the lift.
And wow, that's remarkable.
So that's how we keep our CAC payback in check there. I mean, obviously I think we talked about this at one other point, but the magic number, which is basically like the new acquisition number, is we call it ARR, sales and marketing over ARR, and that we are obviously always trying to drive up every day, looking for ways to like optimize that. But it's pretty efficient, as is. So
wow,
but it's nuanced for every company. So
what are the keys to growth for Help Scout? Or do you not want to talk about that on this podcast?
Happy to. Well, two things have become very clear to me now, being like the primary operator here, as opposed to like being on the board where you think like, oh, just turn this up or do better conversions on the website. I don't know, like, nonsense, like optimization tactics, but we want to win the very small to small businesses. And we want to be the first one in, like Bill.com did. If you want to pay people, you use Bill.com to start your business. If you want to support your customers, you want to use Help Scout because it's like friendly, 15 minutes to get set up. It's not, you don't need people like Zendesk and Intercom, whatever. So, but if we want to stay here and really win this market, and the ACVs are going to continue to remain low, $1,000-ish mark, and that's on purpose. We want to be the first in. We don't want to raise ACVs. We don't want to move up. So we're kind of like limited to this. I had to like think about how we increase our feet on the street or our sales motion without adding marketing and sales dollars. And that's actually through distributors. So I am taking kind of like a new approach to thinking about how we like get more distribution without having to pay for that. And so that's a whole different other process, but that's indirect sales. So that's one way at that. Again, like, as I mentioned, you pay when the deal closes. You're not paying for people to sit inside your organization and make dials and try to close deals. ACV, too low for that. I don't think it's going to be materially better. And then the second thing is, we are thinking about, like other ways to price and package. That's not new, but we could have some revolutionary ways of like thinking about it. I don't want to disclose because I think it's going to be pretty awesome, but there's plenty of levers like kind of there. I think that might be like very interesting for us in the future.
That's really interesting. We've been talking. Sorry, go on.
One other thing, you as a head of marketing also need to consider how much balance you have between headcount and program spend. That was really unbalanced when I came. I think it was like 90-10. So we weren't advertising at all, like no program spend. So over time, again, like, when people would attrit or whatever, I would just say like, well, we're not backfilling that. We have to figure out how to get that work done. We're going to put it into marketing dollars. So now it's closer to like 70-30, and that's been helping on the direct side.
One of the things we've been talking about a lot is how you expand your serviceable addressable market. We spoke about this, I think, 2 episodes ago when we had Clarice President on as well. And a point that Sam has made, I think, on LinkedIn as well, is that it's not just you hire a rep for that vertical and now you're servicing that vertical. There are a lot of things that have to happen for you to be able to break into these markets, especially when you're thinking about markets like CPG and manufacturing, all these other markets that don't buy tech the way tech buys. And one of the things you have to invest in is product marketing. And it seems like the really great companies out there, the Salesforces, the Microsofts, product marketing is one of the most powerful units in those organizations. But there's a lot of confusion, I think, in early and growth stage companies, especially in the growth stage, as to how to do product marketing, when to introduce it, the nuances of it. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about product marketing? When does it make sense? How, like, just your thoughts on it, your general thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I that's basically like where I usually put product marketing is in like kind of the brand group, because it's brand makes demand more efficient, right? So like if you're out in the market, but your brand is awesome because what you say you do and how you look is amazing, and people have endeared themselves to your brand because of it, the demand it's just so much better, right? So for example, if I decide to invest in a D2C newsletter where like e-commerce professionals go, that's a vertical we're targeting, how we show up there, like what the product marketing message is and the design is, it's critical to making sure that once somebody sees it, now that we've invested there, they're like, yes, I need this thing. Obviously the better that is, the higher your response rates and all that other stuff. But I typically don't add that or advise companies to add product marketing before you can figure out like where the demand levers are. I'm like, well, does it matter if you have the best website that says the most amazing things about a product if nobody knows about it? That's like it's like having an amazing retail store in the woods where there's like no traffic.
Yeah.
It's like, who cares what you have in there and how pretty the store is and like all this great stuff? It's like nobody found their way to the front door. So again,
You start there. You start with, we need to drive traffic to this website. Let's assume that
I think so.
we figured it out. We're a couple of $1 million in revenue.
Yeah.
How, this ratio of straight demand versus brand spend, like, do you think about it from a ratio perspective that usually at the Series B stage, it should be like an 80-20, but then at Series D, like, is there like some math of that sort, or you kind of feel it out as you go?
I think the math actually aligns now that like you said this out loud, like to the headcount to program spend.
Interesting.
Headcount is, I have one person basically helping decide, because demand is my background. I actually don't need somebody right now that tells me where to invest the dollars. I intuitively know what that is. And I'm like, this would be a waste of our money. But if you don't, you probably need like someone, like a hedge fund manager who's saying like, we want these dollars in these like programs, like which programs to spend in. There's a headcount for that. But all the other headcount is really in like brand. So I would say like 60% is actually being allocated to brand and 40% is on the stuff that's going to drive the demand.
Got it. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And your number one recommendation typically, Andrea, is for people to start a print magazine, right?
Print to start. Uh-huh. Billboards next.
Also, the background on this is that it was 6 years ago that I was working at a company, and the founder was adamant that he wanted to start a print magazine, and I brought in Andrea to be a consultant, and she's like, why do you want to do that? He's like, because I think it'll change the game. She's like, but it won't change the game.
Like, no. Okay. I don't know how more politely to say this, but this is the worst idea ever.
I think Andrea would be great on boards. Like, founders need an Andrea on every board just to like keep everybody in check. Like, guys. But
also exactly this is why the value that, again, that I find so refreshing is that sometimes you get so down on the dumps on your business. You feel like you're raising a child and the child just isn't living up to your hopes and dreams, and you're staring at it. And Andrew's like, no, this kid can go to college. Yeah. This kid can absolutely go to college and get a good job, maybe not Yale, but we're getting a college degree.
One of the nicest houses I've ever been to was a divorce lawyer's house. And divorce lawyers have no, like, you get a customer once, maybe they'll have a second divorce in their life, right? Yeah. But this is a high churn business. But that business was a thriving business. And it just reminds you that sometimes we get stuck in our ecosystem with like all these things. There are businesses that have really high churn that are remarkable businesses. You just have to figure the rest of the math out.
I did not think about that.
You're not like in a CRM keeping all the people whose divorces you've done, be like, hey guys, staying top of mind here.
Get married again so that you can get divorced again.
You got a
Don't-
matchmaking thing on the side.
Do not get a prenup your second marriage. That's only cynical people do that.
All the content about why prenups are bad are coming from this place.
Well, this, Asad, I think you make a great point. We were in an offsite last week, and Robbie Kelman Baxter, who's a consultant, was talking about how people are in the Apple ecosystem, and there is an LTV associated with that customer, and they are not in a subscription relationship with Apple, right? But they buy an iPhone, and then they buy an Apple Watch, and then they get new AirPods, and then they get a second pair of AirPods because they lost the first pair.
Right.
And so it's just a reminder, because so many. I was talking to a banker this past week, and he was talking about how he advises everybody to get, their contracts, call them subscriptions so that we can call it ARR. But fundamentally, the reality is the customer decides if they're in an ongoing relationship, not your contract structure.
And it only really, this whole ARR thing, this used to drive me crazy, because we would sit in these CEO dinners, and I'm sitting next to 5 services CEOs. We're like, homies, we all the same. And they're all like, my ARR is this. And I'm like, how do you have ARR? And then eventually you find out it's because they have one line in a contract that says auto renew, and they're on 1-year terms. They're like, I have ARR. And you're like, no, because when you go to somebody to buy your business, it only matters when you're thinking about the enterprise value of your business, which only matters when you're trying to sell it. And whoever's going to buy that business is not going to think, this is real ARR. They know what they're looking at. And so you're just confusing yourself. You have to look at your businesses the way they are.
But the flip side's also true, Asad, which is, again, you can have a really valuable business. The
100%.
nicest house you were in was in a person that sold non-recurring services.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing when you're thinking about selling your business or really describing your business is, do you have the right story about how all the pieces fit together? And if those pieces fit together in a seamless way, whether you call it ARR or not, there's still enterprise value that can be generated.
Can you show predictable growth whether or not you've required someone to pay you monthly?
100%.
Exactly right.
I think that's the better.
And that's why in CRO school I teach this class about unit economics, and people say, well, I'm in a services business. Does this even apply to me? I say, well, of course it applies to you if you hope to have an ongoing relationship with your customer, and you have some level of predictability around the first time they buy, whether they come back, then it definitely applies to you.
The more your churn. So in our business, a lot of our customers don't work with us the same way the next year, right? It matters if they've raised a Series B and they're like, listen, we need to hire 30 AEs. You guys are going to do this. That's a big deal for us. The next year, they don't need to hire 30 AEs. They'll hire a couple. And so there's a variance in how we build with our customers as well.
Right.
When you have these realities in your business, the more you understand the unit economics of your business, it becomes even more important, because you have to understand how this machine works and then be able to predict on this machine, because it's a more complex, confusing machine than a basic, standard SaaS company. That math is very easy to understand. You have to spend more time understanding your businesses when you're in the services space. So we have a little bit more time, and I want to touch on something that came out in the Pulse Report, the Pavilion Pulse Report. So Sam,
what a great piece of content.
Yeah. Consistently Pavilion. Okay, so the Feb one is out. Revenue attainment is down 17% from January, with only 49% of companies hitting their targets. Those who missed mentioned tough market conditions, longer sales cycles, and increased churn as reasons. Sentiment is down as well. In December 2023, 29% of execs expected to secure funding this year, but in March, only 4.7% expect to raise money in 2024, even though Carter has reported an increase in capital calls from VCs, and we've had 2 really successful IPOs. Reddit and Astera Labs went public in the last couple of days and have had successful IPOs, which might actually open up the IPO market, which has downstream effects on liquidity and funding, etc. So, Sam, is this 4.7% expectation that you raise money this overcorrection because people got beaten up a little bit in February and were not expecting it? Or is this reasonable? What are your thoughts on this 4.7%? It seemed intense to me.
The call before this one was with a well-known, influencer on LinkedIn who runs a consulting business, who was saying that, two people that run, large consulting businesses, that said This year is performing the same as last year, but it's not performing any better. It's not performing any worse. It's performing the same, which relative to their expectations, I'm only talking about revenue, not cost. So,
Interesting.
they might be profitable because they did a bunch of layoffs, but
Mm.
the point is like they do not believe, this person did not believe that their sentiment was negative for the reason that they were hoping it would be a better year than it's turned out to be.
Interesting.
Which is effectively what the Pulse report says as well,
Yeah.
which is that everybody was hoping there would be a bigger rebound. The economic conditions are stable, but they're not markedly improving. This person also said the summer is going to be very, very tough because of what you just said, the 4.7%, which is a lot of people hoping to raise money that have been holding on by the skin of their teeth,
Interesting.
and are about to go out of business. Now, we've been talking about the wave of people going out of business for as long as we've been doing this podcast. So I don't know why the summer would be any different than today. I think that the wave of shutdowns and consolidation will continue. I think there's going to be more M&A activities. I've talked about M&A activity like Tatango and Catalyst, where no money really changes hands. It's a consolidation to shore up strength in a march towards a bigger enterprise opportunity, over the course of 2025 and 2026. So now, and what do we see at Pavilion? Our new business targets are crushing. Our retention is not. Therefore, we are performing exactly according to plan. Because of overperformance on new business, underperformance on the other side. And I think those things are probably interconnected. But I guess my point is, so I feel where I come out on all of this, and then hand it over back to the two of you, where I come out on all of this is sort of what we've been talking about, which is that the market is not the reason that I'm winning or losing today. That's what I think. I am not attributing any performance to the market. I'm attributing it to execution within the four walls of the company that I'm running. There's an opportunity for great companies to succeed, and there's an opportunity for average companies to fail. And we're not getting a bunch of tailwinds, but we're not getting a bunch of headwinds. That's kind of all you can ask for. That's where I come out on it.
Andrea, how does this year feel compared to last year? Because a lot of people are saying what Sam is saying, but again, like new business is crushing on Sam's side, which like says something about the market. I know at STA we're having a good time this quarter. And we work on sales recruitment, so we can only have good times when other people
Right.
are having good times. And we've got a number of projects where these are high six-figure projects that all need to be fulfilled in the next 3 to 4 months. And we hadn't had any of those conversations last year. Like last year was like 1, 2, 3 roles at a time max from a client. Now it's like, hey, we have one that we're talking to right now. The email was we're going to hire 120 people in the next 6 months, and we need a partner for that. We hadn't had that conversation in a while. So we feel quite different.
Awesome.
If we feel good. What are your how is it looking on your end? Like, how does it feel to you this year?
It feels the same as every other year, like
Yeah.
we set targets though that were reasonable because we didn't want to spend to and miss, right? Like to Sam's point earlier, like we are heading towards profitability. We are a really well-run business. Like kudos to like our CFO and the CEO for always running the business. Like I wouldn't say like in an austere manner because like they have made investments in the past. Some paid off, some didn't, like everybody else. But we set our targets reasonably as well. That's another like wonderful moment to have with my partners to say like, look, can we just plan for a year where we think we're going to like, be right down the fairway versus like, some mega epic like event. We just didn't plan on that. So we're not spending to it either. So I would say like, it feels like every other year I've ever had in SaaS.
I love that. I think that's a good place to move to Shoutouts, Sam. What do you think?
I think that's a fantastic place to move to Shoutouts. Let's do it. Shoutouts, wins of the week.
I'll start.
You go first.
So shout out. I want to shout out a couple of pieces of content that I have consumed in the last couple of days. I went back and listened to the Acquired episode on LVMH. And again, there's so much business insight in that episode. It's totally worth listening to. It's 5 hours, I think, so it's like worth it if you take the time. It's really interesting. I've also found that I've spent a lot of time reading up on Winning by Design's content recently. The new book is fantastic, and these guys are just such scientists. There's something that they're cooking up around the ROI of driving up time in seat for AEs compared to ROI of driving up productivity within a sales team. And it's shocking what they're able to uncover. So I think everybody should be buying their book and consuming their stuff. They do some really good work in our ecosystem. So those are my two shout outs.
Love that. Andrea?
I think I will just double down on my shout outs to Nick Francis, the CEO at HelpScout, and the CFO, Shauna Fisher, because they are true partners to me at this company, in that, we all feel like we're aligned on each other's successes. Like I have an appreciation for the hard job the CEO has, but he equally has a hard appreciation for how hard, my job is, in Shauna. So I don't know. It feels like a really wonderful, we had an awesome offsite like 2 weeks ago, just spending time together and like digging in, and like, hopefully we get this big job done over the next couple of years, which is to double the business. So fingers crossed we do that.
It's so nice to work with reasonable, rational, calm, like just adults.
There's nothing better than that. And frankly, like, I refuse to work at companies now where like there's a jerk at the helm.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah, you guess you can't work at Pavilion, sadly.
Based on Pavilion's last
No.
We don't have to bring that up every episode.
No, you're not a jerk.
Andrea and I don't know each other very well. We've only hung out for, I think probably 14 years or something like that.
Yeah.
I would work for you, Sam. I've spent a lot of time with you. I would work for you.
Well, thank you very much. My shout out is to Guy Rubin. Guy has become a very good friend of mine, and we were talking about business, and we were talking about kind of our lives, and he shared this great anecdote, and I'm going to butcher it, but basically there's a guy that runs a little bar on the beach in Jamaica, let's say, and every day he plays soccer on the beach with his kids, and then in the evening, they serve food and drink, to the guests, and the guests come and they have a lovely time, and the guy has a great life. And one day, an investment banker comes down to Jamaica and talks to the owner of this bar, and he says, this is amazing. This is incredible. We should expand. You should buy the hotel on this property. You should buy a bunch of other bars. We can expand. He said, and the guy says, okay, then what? He says, well, after that, then we build a franchise. You can license the franchise. You can make a ton of money that way. You can expand into other Caribbean locations. He goes, and then what? Well, and then after that, we can go into food seasoning, and we can do hot sauce, and we can do all of these things. And the guy says, and then what? And he says, well, then we can sell this business for like $200 million, and you can make $200 million. And the guy says, and then what? And he says, well, and then you can, you can just retire, and you can spend all morning on the beach with your son playing soccer, which of course is where he started. And the point is that we are always saying, over the next hill is the destination, and the destination is right here, right now.
Yeah.
And, I have a job where I get to fly around the world. I get to go speak at these conferences and eat tacos and talk to the two of you and AJ once a week. And I don't need anything else. And it's blessed to exist, and it's blessed to go for a walk around Town Lake and have a margarita. And if nothing ever happens to this company other than it continues to exist to enable me to have this job, then that's a fantastic outcome, and I'm grateful for it.
Love that. That was great. I've heard that story before, but not said that way. That was really good. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Join us on Thursday for Topline Hotline. Andrea, you are an exceptional co-host.
Thank you.
And AJ, we're good. We have the new trio. He's going to be seething. He's going to be listening to this. He's so upset right now. He's so insecure and so upset.
We love you, AJ.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.
This episode was brought to you by the book Ecosystem-Led Growth, a new book by Crossbeam CEO Bob Moore. Pre-order your copy at elgbook.com. That's elgbook.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Topline. To learn more about the trends, news, and developments impacting the world of B2B SaaS, head to joinpavilion.com, where more than 10,000 of the world's top go-to market leaders go to achieve and unlock their full professional potential.